Oh my God, guys, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. Yeah, so the Browns look pretty decent in this week's joint practices. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So the Cleveland Browns joint practices with the Philadelphia Eagles are in the books. 2 days, two days of getting really good reps, really good opportunities against the Super Bowl champions nonetheless. The Eagles have one of the best rosters in the NFL, one of the best offensive lines, one of the best defensive lines. So just a really good kind of measuring stick for this team to see where they're at. Carolina, it's a good opportunity, of course, when you're going up against another NFL team and, you're in that competitive setting. But they didn't allow any tackling. It was a bit, a little bit laid back, shall we say, for a joint practice. Whereas these two joint practices with the Eagles, the only thing that's not allowed is hitting the quarterback. As good as an opportunity as you can get to truly replicate game scenarios outside of a game, not actually playing in a game. How did the Browns fare? So, the Browns played the Eagles in joint practices 2 years ago before 2023. They looked fairly decent. Elliot Shaw, who's one of the, every Browns fan's favorite Eagles reporter, who not only gives wins and losses for joint practices, but has the Eagles at 10-2 before yesterday's joint practice in all-time joint practices. The Browns were actually one of those two losses, shall we say, as I was referencing back in 2023. And one of the other losses is now yesterday, with the Cleveland Browns apparently, according to Elliott, getting the win quite comfortably in yesterday's final joint practice. But as I was saying, in 2023, kind of similar, we had a good performance against the Eagles in the joint practices, and that kind of, not led to and wasn't the overriding factor, but kind of gave us a sign of what to expect, especially from the defense. And then they just followed suit, and obviously we all know how that year went. We went 11-6, made the playoffs with 5 different starting quarterbacks, mainly because of that defense. That's all we have to go off now. Is obviously last year the joint practices, we weren't that great. Preseason, I've spoken about it before. It was a mess. Just even getting the operations running seemed impossible. It should have been foreshadowing of how bad of a season it was going to be. I'm not saying that this is, always the case. Of course, when the Browns went 0-16, they went 3-0 in the preseason. They won all their preseason games. So that's of course not what I'm saying, and I'm not even so much referencing the preseason games themselves, but more so the performances in the joint practices and the opportunities you get around that. So Cleveland Browns, from all reports, that's Cleveland Browns reporters, national reporters, Philadelphia Eagles reporters. Browns dominated the Eagles, especially in day 2. Day 1, it even sounded like the D-line was, pretty much getting what they wanted against that Eagles offensive line. And then yesterday in the second day, it was, it's being reported as total domination. Myles Garrett, this is coming from Eagles reporters. Myles Garrett unblockable. Every single snap, Myles Garrett is getting a sack on Jalen Hurts if he was allowed, according to these guys. He's unblockable. He looks as good as he ever has, which is incredible because I don't really know how the best defensive player on the planet can get even better, but here we are. So that should be very exciting to see. Mason Graham, multiple sacks in these joint practices. Alex Wright, even Carson Schwarzenegger chipping in. So, this defensive line, this front seven seemed to eat against this Eagles offensive line in these joint practices, which, as I've said before, and as I said earlier in this video, this is one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And the Cleveland Browns defense, essentially packed them up and pretty much did as good as a job against them as anyone can in a joint practice. So that should be, I've spoken on here at length about how good I expect this defensive line to be, how good I expect this defense to be. This is, of course, a great sign, and I think, does foreshadow and hopefully leads to a really good defense in 2025. Something that I expect. I think this defense can be a top 5 defense in the NFL this year. And they've taken all the right steps and shown everything that they can so far to this point to keep me believing that and not change my mind, and somewhat in some cases maybe even increase my belief in them, just from hearing how good this defense has been in these joint practices. It's not just the front seven as well. Denzel Ward apparently is also being Denzel Ward, one of the best corners in the NFL. Had a really nice break-up on Devontae Smith to prevent a touchdown in one of these team drills. Would we like to see some more corner depth? Probably. I'd maybe like to see them bring 1 or 2 more guys in. But overall, the 11 guys that are going to be out there as starters, and even a lot of those role players as well, is more than enough. And I think this is going to be a very, very good defense. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think this is going to be really, really good. And then the offense is actually fairly encouraging, what we've heard from these 2 joint practices. As I mentioned last year, it was a mess. Joint practices, preseasons, camp, all of it. This offense was terrible. It was quite easy for anyone to see that. Yes, they've not been lights out in camp by any means. But I do think that, the fact that this Browns defensive line has gone into Philly and gone against the Philadelphia's offensive line in these joint practices and absolutely dominated them. And I'm talking, to the point that even Eagles reporters aren't able to word it any differently, that they have to admit that they're getting dominated. That does kind of somewhat change my perspective on this offense, because this offense has been going up against that defensive line in practice. And as I said, it's not been lights out by any means, but they've not been horrible. They've not looked out of place, shall we say, and especially not compared to last year. So that's an encouraging sign to, see this defensive line go up against another team, see how much they dominate them, and then kind of look at them go up against this Browns offense in training camp and at practice. And it is encouraging. And also, the Eagles' defensive line, one of the best in the NFL as well. And the Browns, I think they struggled a little bit on offense in day one against that defensive line, as you would expect. That is a very, very good defensive line. But from all of the reports yesterday, the Browns' offense got on pretty decently against the Philadelphia defense. They had, according to Elliott, there was one instant, like a 5-minute period where the Browns offense had 4 touchdowns. I think there was a Joe Flacco touchdown, or maybe 2 Joe Flacco touchdowns, and even a trick play touchdown that, Elliott says it. I agree with him. You don't really count rushing touchdowns in these kind of settings, but, when someone runs in untouched from that, from that far out, you have to count that. So, encouraging signs, encouraging stuff out of this offense. They are showing that they can move the ball, they can score in these red zone drills against a really good defense, and just continuing the rest of training camp are going up against their own defense in the Browns. It's only going to be beneficial for them. I've said it before. I don't think this this offense is going to be amazing. Don't expect it to be lights out. But I do think there's a chance it can be better than people think. Yes, we want to see more from these wide receivers, which, of course, I will get into the most recent signing in another video probably. The running game, Quinshon Judkins, it has now been confirmed that all charges will be dropped. He will not face any criminal charges. That does not mean that he won't be suspended by the NFL personal conduct policy, but that does obviously decrease the chances of that happening. And if there is a suspension, it's going to be less severe. So to get Quinshon back into this running game as well, I expect this run game to be good. And then, you just need somewhat competent quarterback play from this team and pair that with the defense, some of the weapons that you've got, as I said, in the running back room, Jerry Jeudy, Deontay Johnson maybe, if Jamari Thrash can step up, if Cedric Tillman can step up. And then, of course, your tight ends in David Njoku and Harold Fanning. I do think this offense can be better and will be better if with those things than people think. I don't think it's going to be the worst offense in the NFL like we've seen last year. I do think they will be improved. And again, that doesn't mean I think they're going to be a top 10 offense. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to go out there and throw for 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. That was, of course, not what I'm saying. But I do think from the signs that we've seen, everything we've seen in training camp, everything we've seen in these joint practices, I am more encouraged now, as of today, a few weeks out from the season, as I was, 6 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 1 month ago, 2 weeks ago. We have seen stuff that should make you more encouraged about this offense. So going into the actual, Eagles preseason game itself, annoyingly, we won't see many starters. We, of course, won't see Shedeur Sanders, as mentioned in my previous video. Will it be Dillon Gabriel? I hope so. I really do. I think it'd be great to get Dillon and Shedeur in back-to-back weeks in kind of the same scenario, same circumstance. Starting the preseason game with pretty much the same guys out there. That will be a good litmus test to kind of evaluate both guys and see how they both handle, not just playing, but everything that goes into it, the operations and so on. So I really want Dillon to play for that. I obviously, of course, want to evaluate Dillon. I'd be lying if I said that Shedeur Sanders probably wasn't, is my preference and someone that I obviously had ranked higher coming out. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to see anything from Dillon Gabriel. I want to see what we have in him. So hopefully he does play in this game, but it is not a guarantee because, of course, he has been dealing with that hamstring injury. If he doesn't play, do we just get a whole game out of Tyler Huntley? I think that's probably going to be the route. It's too late to sign someone now. I'd be pretty surprised if they sign someone, nearly less than 24 hours before the game. So I think if Dillon Gabriel is unable to go, I expect it to be Tyler Huntley probably for the whole game with Joe Flacco there maybe in uniform just in case Tyler Huntley gets hurt or something. But I don't think they're going to want to see Joe Flacco play in this game. If we see Joe Flacco play at all, I think it will be in the last preseason game, maybe for a series or two at the start, and that will probably come after an announcement that he is going to be the starter for week 1. If somehow Kenny Pickett can come back from the injury issues that he's had and can have a really good week next week and can somehow get himself back in contention, maybe he gets to start that game and he's the guy that's announced as the starter. But for now, I think that is more likely than not going to be Joe Flacco. So hopefully we get Dillon Gabriel and Tyler Huntley. If that's the case, I would hope that they do the same thing they did in the Panthers preseason game with Shedeur. Let him play 3 quarters and then let Tyler come in and clean up. But we might not see Dillon, so if we don't, we're going to have to watch a full game of Tyler Huntley, which isn't the most non-entertaining thing. He is a fairly entertaining quarterback to watch, especially in a preseason setting, and he is going to give those guys out there a chance. This is a vet, so this isn't someone that is is going to just fold out there. He's going to give those those receivers and everyone out there a chance. So that's the quarterbacks. Of course, I expect to pretty much be the same everywhere else across the roster as it was last week. We'll probably see some of these rookies, Mason Gray and Carson Schlesinger, early on. That's probably it. I'd like to see a few more carries for Dylan Sampson, obviously only having 2 last week. I'd like to see him maybe get 4, 5, 6, and a few more. Harold Fanning, I'd like to see actually get a target this week. That would be nice. But I expect it to be the same. Don't expect to see any of the main starters out there. I'd like to see Sed and Thrash out there, to be honest. I know they probably won't because they obviously currently view them as number 2 and number 3. But I'd like to see those 2 guys out there as well, getting some more reps. Let's give Deontay Johnson a few more targets as well. But overall, yeah, I expect it to be pretty much the same as last week in terms of the guys that are out there. it's a great chance for all of those depth pieces, for all of those bottom of the roster guys to, maybe put some tape out there, whether that's to make the Browns 53 or whether that's to make another NFL teams 53. You, of course, always are rooting for those guys to do so. You want these guys to be able to, achieve their dreams and not just make the NFL, but stay in the NFL. So expect pretty much the same as last week, but of course, swapping out Shadur Sanders for hopefully Dylan Gabriel and obviously Tyler Huntley as well. Eagles don't play their starters. They never do. And this is kind of the point I've made in previous videos when, people can, I understand, moan about the Browns not playing their starters. I would like to see more starters play, but we can't, act like this is there's a science behind this, and that not starting your starters means that you don't, be successful in the regular season. It's just not true. Sean McVay doesn't play starters ever. I think that's, I think they've done okay, and Philadelphia Eagles don't play their starters. I think they did okay winning a Super Bowl. So, of course, I'm not saying that's, that makes it 100% okay that the Browns don't play their starters. Of course, I'd like to see guys out there, and I'd like to see guys getting reps, but, that just kind of confirms the whole there's no science behind this kind of stuff. So, they're not going to be playing any of their starters. But, as I said, this is a really deep roster. This is one of the best rosters in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles. So even those, number 2, number 3 guys on that depth chart are good players. So this is a good chance for those guys, as I mentioned, for those rookies, for those depth pieces, for those kind of bottom of the roster guys to come out, get some good reps against the Super Bowl champs, and hopefully win this game. But it's preseason. Who cares what the final result is? I don't. All I care about is, none of your players getting injured and getting some good reps for these guys out there. I am actually at a wedding for this game, annoyingly. But, I'm sure you guys have figured out by now. I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm a bit of a football junkie, shall we say. So I will most likely have this game on my phone at least the first half, especially if Dylan Gabriel is played. If Tyler Huntley's playing, maybe I can kind of just sneak over it a little bit, not be quite as focused on it. But, I'll do my best to watch it as much as I can. Of course, I will watch all the highlights and everything afterwards, talk about the game, obviously, afterwards and what we saw. But for now, expect the same as last week, but just with different quarterbacks there. Dylan Gabriel instead of Shadur Sanders. But that would do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like. Hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with social... But that would do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. I'm sure you all know how the algorithm works. The algorithm gods, shall we say. You can also check the links in my description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. And as I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans. And even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing weekend. Enjoy this preseason game. But most importantly, go Browns.